enjoying life when I forgot that Steven Crowder existed. It had been, oh man, it had been almost 10 years. And then I saw this video, The Case for Fascism. I haven't been keeping up with Steven Crowder. I did a quick scroll through his videos and I said, okay, he's completely irrelevant and has been for a really long time. So I wondered what track the grift train over on Louder with Crowder was on. So then I see he's in the fascist camp. I was like, okay, did he go like full Groyper and Christian nationalism and all that kind of stuff? I scrolled through his videos and it's basically, I hate Muslims, Zoran Mamdani is a terrorist, I hate Muslims. I didn't really see very much, and I didn't look all that far, but I didn't see very many like pro-Israel things, for example, but there were some. So I guess he hasn't really gone down that road. And it turns out, I did a little bit of looking, he's been super, well, I don't know, is this pro-Israel or just I hate Muslims? But this video is 17 years old. Check this out.
The truth is, they're right. I mean, a lot of these other countries are living in the dark ages, but we have to ask, why is that? Israel has arguably the best military intel in the world. They crap in sand dunes. Israel has a high quality of living and is often at the forefront of modern technology. They sell rugs. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. 8 years ago, we had this.
Alexa, what is Palestine?
Palestine, officially the state of Palestine, is it a jure sovereign state in the Middle East claiming the West Bank and Gaza Strip with East Jerusalem as the designated capital, although its administrative center is located in Ramallah.
Alexa, where is Jerusalem?
Jerusalem is the capital of Israel.
So, I mean, it's shocking that he's actually that stupid. Here's the border. Here's Jerusalem. Now, this is the West Bank, and look what's on that side of the border. The old city of Jerusalem. Geography is hard, Stephen. He doesn't seem to be one of the influencers that, Israel is paying for their pro-genocidal propaganda or anything like that. But, I mean, he seems sympathetic, at least to them. So most right-wing culture warrior, completely irrelevant, miserable, sad, fat, divorced right-wing pundits, a lot of them are going, the anti-Semitic Groyper route. Crowder's not doing that, but he loves fascism all of a sudden. Now, this is very bizarre considering Steven Crowder's the only person in the world dumb enough to think this.
Alexa, who were the Nazis?
Historically, Nazis were those who followed the far-right ideology of Adolf Hitler, with political beliefs involving the superiority of the Aryan race.
Now, what was so eye-raising about that, you may be wondering? Well, we'll keep listening.
Right of German territorial expansion, and the exclusion and eventual extermination of unfit peoples from the population. In modern times, neo-Nazi ideology still advocates hyper-nationalism.
Goes on for a while.
Purity.
Alexa, who was the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party?
Here's something I found on Wikipedia. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly referred to in English as the Nazi Party.
There we
is
go.
A far-right
Thank you.
Political party in Germany.
Alexa, no more.
So he thinks that Nazis are liberal socialist left-wingers. So Steven Crowder is now a left-winger? Is that what's going on here? He's getting absolutely roasted in the comments, including by me. But why do they keep calling us fascists? And then this alludes to what I was talking about 10 years ago. Hitler was a liberal socialist. Next video will be the case for psychologically abusing your wife. Oh, man. So let's hear what he has to say for some reason. We'll speed it up a little bit.
How often do you hear the accusation of fascism? Okay. What do you think it means? All right. To begin with, communism, Marxism, socialism, responsible for at least 100 million deaths in the 20th century.
So yeah, he mentions this over and over and over again. The vast majority of those deaths take place in China, but the vast majority of the deaths overall are due to famine. Now, yes, it was famine that occurred while the country was living under what it considered communism. So does that count as a death caused by communism? I think you can make a strong argument, I guess, that it was, that a lot of them were. For the Soviet famines, a huge reason why was because of the anti-scientific practices that Lysenko, I can't remember how to say his name, ushered in. Now, his anti-science was informed by his collectivist ideology of communism. But to say that it was caused by communism, I don't know. It seems a little bit weird. With China, I think you can make the stronger case because it was the idea that communism is top-down authoritarian control is just literally not what communism is. Now you can say, yeah, but in practice, it ends up being blank. Like capitalism isn't supposed to be all the horrible stuff it does today, but that's what it ends up doing. So in most people's minds, that's just what it is. You have the stronger case for it in China because the people were told exactly what to do with their land, grow these types of crops. It led to huge amounts of crop failures and soil loss. Now, none of that nuance is going to take place here, and the deaths are always attributed to essentially like the boogeyman of the gulag. What they're trying to convince you of is that every single one of the deaths was a violent death. And that's just not even remotely the case. Those did happen in huge amounts, but as a share of the 100 million deaths, no. Now, to my memory, in this video, he never talks about how many people died under fascism, but he does, in at least one part, say that the number of people that died under communism is vastly greater, and it's not even close, or something to that effect. 85 million people died in World War II. All of those deaths were from violence or the direct result of violence, such as starvation and blockades and things like that. 85 million is pretty darn close to 100 million, and actually, these deaths are much worse because that only took place for less than a decade. Whereas communism, the totality of all these deaths, if we added up the years, it would be something like 50 years or 60 years. So Steven Crowder is going to, and people like him are going to tell you that fascism only killed, and they're just going to cite the Holocaust. They're going to say that that's it. No, it's vastly more than that. And you know who defeated fascists? You know who the only people to have ever defeated fascism are? The communists. Russia defeated the Nazis, Stephen. You could argue they kind of defeated themselves, but 40 million Russian people lost their lives in that conflict. They're the ones that sacrificed, and they're the ones that actually defeated them. But who was actually in Berlin when the war ended? No. The Soviets defeated the Nazis.
Seems to me that should be the starting off point for every semester of history, certainly economics, when you're looking at different socioeconomic systems. 100 million.
Every single history class that's ever taught should start off with that. Okay, if we're going to do that, remember, we have to teach both sides. We have to teach the controversy. And fascism killed almost the same number of people, except all of the deaths were direct, violent deaths. And they did it in, a fifth the time?
Dead minimum to begin with. Makes it pretty hard to say, Russia is the cause of all wars, right? 100 million dead, communism, that's the toll. Now, when action is taken to disinfect a nation, and sometimes I will admit, very radical action, taken to deal with the root ideology and systems that have led to the death of 100 million people, the left yells fascism. The problem is fascism has been used historically, not in the way that you've been told. It's been used against communism because with communism, socialism, right, you vote them in, you have to shoot your way out. They don't leave once they attain power, and they nationalize.
What What is he talking about? Obviously, Cuba fits what he's talking about, but all the other instances, he's gonna basically just bring up South America, and then he's gonna talk about Spain. None of those instances, in none of those places, did they ever achieve a uniparty system, a one-party system, which is what happens under communism. So they literally weren't communists, and in a few of them, the coup happened literally only 3-ish years after the first socialist president took over. So they didn't even wait for the next election to happen. And so he's just all of that is just completely, it's not just illogical, it's ahistorical as well.
The means of production distribution, which, by the way, is the goal of Marxism. So you've probably been taught.
Yeah, but that never happened. That's never happened anywhere.
Or maybe not even taught.
No, like I say that. I'm not one of these people that goes around saying there's never even been communism in the response to when people say communism is really bad. I think that's an extremely stupid argument because by extension, you also can't say anything bad about capitalism because capitalism's never happened either because we don't have free markets anywhere. There are non-disclosure agreements. There's regulation on the books regarding trade. So if communism's never happened, then neither has capitalism. And we can talk about socialism and moving toward communism. The only reason I'm saying it here is because Stephen's pretending that the end result or whatever of communism with a complete uniparty system, nobody owns private property, that never happened, and he's acting like it did.
You just have teachers point to historical examples of fascists, maybe even just one or two, and then go, see, fascism bad. We did a little bit more. Well, hold on a second. We always want to ask why. It doesn't justify it, but the left, who is so willing to ask why when someone commits a heinous crime against an innocent person and is willing to fight to get them out of prison, which they also don't believe in, that's a part of Marxism, they're not willing to ask why someone may have risen to power with a mandate of the masses against the representatives of an ideology that has killed.
Stephen, why did the socialism and the communism happen? See, that doesn't happen in this video. He spends this whole thing going through, well, look, they had to do fascist coups in Chile and Bolivia and Spain and wherever else, and Argentina, I think, because, and then he tells you about what was happening because of the socialists that they elected. And he doesn't tell you anything about, well, yeah, but what were the failures or the struggles that were going on that made people sympathetic toward socialism or communism? He's such a clown, a fat clown.
Killed, again, 100 million people in the 20th century. So here's how we're going to define fascism.
100 million people over the course of 60 years, whereas fascism killed 85 million people in less than 10 years.
The way the left does, every time someone does something to prevent the left from completely subverting a nation or to try and reverse course. The left wants you to believe that fascism, not Marxism, not communism, 100 million dead, is the biggest.
85 million dead under fascism.
Greatest.
In no time at all.
Evil threat in the world.
We are witnessing a fascist takeover of this country. And I really hope the Republican Party wakes up to that.
All power is vested in the executive. It sure looks a lot like fascism.
Trump is literally a fascist.
Yeah. Look at the 14 points of fascism and then look at this administration. They're doing every single one of them. Geez, did they use constant patriotic slogans, symbols, and songs and all this stuff and put it on flags and symbols and clothing on public display? But that means that Obama was that too, because he sold merchandise and flew the American flag. It's not fascism if you do any one of these things. It's fascism when you do all of these things. So that's a check. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. I mean, with the boat bombing thing and the plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza and turn it into Donald Trump and Jared Kushner's private real estate deal. We don't even need to elaborate on that. Identification of enemies and scapegoats as a unifying cause. Yeah, it's the reason you are suffering is because of all those brown people and all these leftists and the DEI. Nobody has distracted the culture from what's actually happening to them and replaced it with culture war issues. Nobody's been better at that than Donald Trump. Supremacy of the military. Yeah, just like he has that absolute nutcase in there who fires all of the people that investigate abuses in war crimes and human rights, by the way. So back to that. But yeah, $1.5 trillion military now, all the stupid AI propaganda that they do with respect to that, faking that he bench pressed 315 pounds, rampant sexism, doesn't even need to be elaborated upon. Controlled mass media. Yep. Mergers and acquisitions are happening directly under him. People like, was it CBS? I can't remember. Whichever news company had to settle, he was going to sue them because one of them said he was a rapist or something like that. Well, they wanted to do a merger, and they knew they would win the case in court, but then Trump wouldn't sign off on the merger. So, and all kinds of other examples. They won't let anybody into the Pentagon unless they agree to certain stipulations, and nobody agreed to it except for Newsmax. Obsession with national security. Again, the whole talk about us being invaded and shit like that. Don't need to elaborate on that. Religion and government intertwined. Yeah, the ambassador to Israel is a dispensationalist, perverted Christian psychopath. So is Pete Hegseth. Literally, his spiritual advisor is a woman that speaks in tongues. Corporate power protected. Yep, the gutting of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Like, there's a gazillion things with this. The desire to completely deregulate AI, which luckily they didn't get away with that. Labor power is suppressed. Don't need to elaborate on that any further. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. I don't need to justify that. That is as plain as day. Obsession with crime and punishment. Literally already talked about this. Rampant cronyism and corruption. Yep, the pardons are literally for sale with this administration. And fraudulent elections. Now, they have not so far carried out any fraudulent elections, but they're kind of doing the reverse of that and saying that the elections are fraudulent. And then they tried to coup the government back in 2020. And they absolutely are talking about how they're going to do everything they can to control and restrict voting for the upcoming midterms. And certainly, I mean, put this video in the vault for what happens in our next presidential election. He says he's not going anywhere. They're going to completely, if they lose, they're going to claim that it wasn't real, and he's going to absolutely try to stay in power. So absolutely, they are fascist.
That one guy who said, we want a country where everyone feels safe. I don't. What do I mean by that? I don't want communists to feel safe. I don't want people who share the goal.
Political violence, right? Hey, don't call us like up until now, don't call us fascists because you're inciting political violence against us. Like, these people, when the term stochastic terrorism was used against them, they said, oh, that's completely stupid and it's unjustifiable and you're restricting free speech, whatever. Meanwhile, the whole time they've been like, don't call us fascists. You're the reason Charlie Kirk happened. You're the reason, I don't know, you're the reason we have Luigi Mangione. And now he is sitting here thinking, yes, I want communists to feel physically endangered in my country.
Goal of subverting and destroying this country. They're not, just to be clear, Marxists and those in the American Communist Party or the DSA, they don't seek to destroy America because it's fascist. They've always sought to destroy America because it's not Marxist, because it's not communist. It doesn't matter who's in power. They want to bring us to, I don't want those people to feel safe. I don't want those people to rest easy. I don't want them to create a coalition and turn this into every single communist nation that has ever existed. Let's go through some historical examples here. One that's very commonly pointed to. And just to be clear, this does not mean that I am supportive of or justifying everyone in the fascist response, right? Everyone involved with that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to provide you with some historical context. So case one, Chile.
Right. This is like, I haven't watched it, but Matt Walsh has this video about the real history, or what they don't tell you about the Confederacy during the Civil War. So, look, I'm not saying they're good, but I am just telling you, hey, you know, there were reasons and stuff behind it, while leaving out the other reasons. I'm not saying blank, I'm just saying blank.
The story you were likely told, if at all, 73, far-right military dictator, Pinochet, you've heard this term a lot, it's become just a kind of a shorthand insult for a fascist. Pinochet ousted a democratically elected
He was a far-right dictator. It was a military coup.
Allende after a coup. Here, we see this from The Atlantic. The ultimate lesson of the 1973 coup that brought in General Pinochet's dictatorship was that the people would not in the end be denied their choice. Foreign Affairs in there, it says, Chile once boasted a longer history of stable democratic rule than most of its neighbors in much of Western Europe. Now it is the last major country on South American continent to return to civilian government after a wave of authoritarianism. All right. So Pinochet came in.
Yeah, that's all correct.
Here's the reality. From 1970 to 73, do you know what created Pinochet? It was the mark.
A democratically elected leftist government.
Salvador Allende. Mm-hmm. Far left, Unidad Popular coalition. I'll just
democratically elected through the peaceful process of democracy.
Unidad Popular coalition. Socialists, communists, radicals. So what were the results, by the way? Why do you think Pinochet is still popular today? You can't poll it officially, but Pinochet was immensely popular.
Right. There is no data, but even today it's really popular.
Also left, by the way. Left of his own volition, which fascists don't tend to do. So why? Why would someone who was a military dictator, why would he come to power? Well, could it be because the socialist Marxists before him had...
He was literally a military dictator.
Inflation up 1,600%. Wages were down 35%. Wow. The socialist Allende responded with these price controls that, by the way, created an entire black market and enabled crime cartels. Basic goods were selling for like 142% over...
Right. Then vote them out. But no, instead a violent coup was done instead. So yeah, people like Steven Crowder, like they hate democracy. And at no point am I going to sit here and say that that he's wrong, that the inflation. Basically, every single one of these instances is there was a lot of inflation and people were going hungry. Like that's his entire argument. And then he says GDP went up after the coup. So his entire argument for every single one of these cases is I'd rather be a rich fascist than a poor communist. Maybe Steven Crowder, like his grandpa served in World War II or something. And his grandpa, took a whole bunch of like Nazi silverware. That was kind of a popular thing. And it was all this like really fine dinnerware. And Steven used to look at it when he was a stupid young fat boy. He just looked at it and be like, "God darn it, those are really cool. I want to be like that someday." And now he's becoming like that. He wants to be the man in High Castle.
For normal prices on the black market. So what happened was Pinochet, with overwhelming support, could have been anybody, let's be clear, went in.
But why was Salvador Allende elected, Stephen? And I don't know. Okay, I don't know the history of this, but he says, well, you may poo-poo the fascism, and they did a little bit of fascism, but let's remember what led up to it. There was a reason for the bloody revolution, okay? What was the reason for the bloodless leftist revolution before that, which was peaceful and democratic? Stephen, remember how you talked about how you don't like all the sand people, right? And presumably a large part of that is because they're embroiled in violence. Well, you want to be just like them. Actually, Stephen, you would love them. They hate women. They don't allow for abortion. They don't allow for homosexuality, any of that stuff. You actually culturally envy every single thing about them. It's just that, consumerism has turned you into a fat, stupid little boy. So the only thing you actually care about is, do I have all the widow creature comforts that I want? Man, this is like the most dramatic downhill slide after a divorce. I'm sure Steven doesn't go to therapy because that would be gay or something. But to publicly show everybody, he kind of is doing therapy in a way, because to publicly show everybody the incredible downhill slide, look at the struggle of my life. That is my life post-divorce. Steven, you are incredibly brave for that.
And clean things up. Now, could you say that he went a little too far? Well, sure. Sure, he had a few communists who went for helicopter rides and we never saw them again. But if you weren't a communist, you weren't at great risk. Not whitewashing everything he did, as the left does with communists. But
right. So in this case, where nobody was killed, nobody was murdered, we didn't have violent deaths occurring, under socialism. Look, I'm not justifying the violent deaths and the murders and the subversion of democracy, actually the removal of democracy. Look, I'm not excusing any of it. I'm just saying, yeah, I understand why it happened.
But it was a response. So what did you see from 77 to 81? Average GDP growth was about 8%. Inflation fell to single digits from quadruple digits. Poverty went from 50% as a rate to 10%. Unemployment went from 15% down to 6%.
Yep. So if you didn't like it, it could have been overturned democratically in the next election, because Chile still had a democratically elected president and a multi-party system. There were still opposition parties. They were fully legal and elections were continuing. People still owned private property and businesses. So if you don't like it, they could have had an election. And if in the election, with the multi-party system still in place, so you can't blame it on the communists consolidating power, if the communists still would have won, well, then apparently people would rather have that than live under authoritarian fascism. But no, Steven Crowder knows what's best for other people. Steven Crowder wants you to live under violent fascism rather than economically struggle under socialism.
And again, this cannot be.
I want you to die under fascism rather than go hungry under socialism. That's what he wants.
This cannot be stated enough. Overwhelming support. Pinochet. From the people for his reforms. It became known as the Great Chilean Experiment. By the way, even after he left power, they kept Pinochet's constitution. Did you know that? Brazil. A story you've probably been told. 1964 military coup overthrew democratically elected president João Goulart.
Yep, that's what happened. So they violently overthrew the democratic system and installed instead a military dictatorship.
The reality? Well, look, this president, the policies destroyed, as we saw before. You know, if it didn't...
Then vote them out.
Didn't take part in killing 100 million people as the rest of communism. Well, inflation at about 100% was pretty bad. GDP non-existent, literally less than 1%. Pretty bad. So what did he propose?
You know, Stephen, that inflation's pretty bad right now. So when should Donald Trump be thrown out of a helicopter, Stephen? If not now, then when? What do the inflation numbers have to get to? Please answer that question, Stephen.
Nationalizing foreign oil refineries, by the way.
Oh, man, Stephen, you do know that Donald Trump has nationalized to a degree, not like the entire thing, but semiconductors, minerals, mining, and U.S. steel. You do know that those things have been nationalized, right, Stephen? Man, Stephen's going to throw Trump out of a helicopter any day now.
Seizing agricultural land, granting voter rights to the illiterate because he knew he would never win an election again. He doubled down on all the policies that were making everybody's lives miserable. And so what happened was the military coup came to, quote, complete the mission of restoring economic and financial order to Brazil. 64 to 74, the economic, you look at inflation, it was cut by 82%. You look at the GDP annual average rate, less than 1%. It went to 13%.
Wow.
Industry growth was up 30%. And again, the coup was supported by the people. So it's very different for people. When people hear coup, they go, military dictator, military leader.
Right.
When you live in a country that's been disarmed and a country that has been subject to actual corruption in a way that we don't know, this happens all across South America, there's nothing they can do. And so there can be a military to completely oppress and subjugate the people, or the military is used to liberate the people, or used with the support of the people. Either way, the military is being used because the people can't do a thing.
Like, what is he talking about? The military was used being against the people. So in response, the military overthrew the government for the people. And if he's making the argument, well, no, it's either one or the other, and they chose for it. Who chose? The military chose. The military just chose to do one thing. Yeah, and then they lived under a repressive dictatorship. So instead of, let's vote our way out of the situation we're in right now, let's have a coup and then not have democracy at all, and people have a little bit more money, but now we don't live in a democracy anymore. To my knowledge, Steven Crowder never thought during the Biden administration that there should be a military coup happening. And we had horrible, rampant inflation during that period, and 20 million people crossed the border illegally, like all this stuff. And yet Steven Crowder's whole attitude the whole time was, yeah, just go out and vote. I'm assuming, at least. But when it's other people, when it's when it's not somewhere that Steven Crowder lives, then yeah, Steven Crowder's all like, yep, violent military takeover. That's what you people should do. He's like all the people cheering for the Iran war. Yes, young American men and women, you need to go die for Israel because that's what I want you to do for the good of the country.
Here's a story you probably heard. Far-right Francisco Franco ushered in years of dictatorship after basically taking out the democratically elected government. This comes from The Guardian. Half a century.
Yes. Oh, real quick, just on Brazil. Yeah, they weren't communist either. They even during that during Goulart, I don't know how to say it exactly. It wasn't a uniparty system. There was still private ownership. They never abolished capitalism.
Century on the deeds and legacy of the man whose military coup against the Republican government ushered in a full-decade dictatorship built around the authoritarian ideology of National Catholicism continue to haunt, divide, and confuse 21st century Spain.
Confused?
They're so confused in Spain.
In this case, there was an actual civil war that happened. It's kind of like one of these tragic things where when you have a civil war and then there's the struggle for who gains control, whoever does gain control in that case, it's going to be bad pretty much whichever side it is.
Here's the reality. 36 in 1939. You had this popular front coalition, communist, socialist, Marxist, right? What happens, they took power. They first mass released all of the other communist, socialist, Marxists from prison. So picture Arkham Asylum. They punished landowners and instituted all these incredible draconian agrarian reforms, forced the wealthy to take their money out of Spain. They ushered in what you know as the Spanish Civil War. And the result was,
I think they burned churches and stuff like that too. Yeah, it was bad.
What is referred to as fascism, where Franco seized power, but brought some stability, including cutting inflation in half. They don't tell you that. Almost tripling the GDP.
What? So Franco's government, when he took power for over a decade, they had a ton of autarkic policies. The industry was state controlled. They had price controls. They did protectionism. And then in like 1959, Spain opened up. And then that's when they really grew economically. So no, it wasn't, there was all this state controlled communism going on. And then Franco came in and stopped that. No, Franco came in and installed a bunch of it. Yes, there were some actual national socialist things that did happen under fascism.
That's how you know they failed, when you ask someone to point to a successful example of communism or socialism. Like, oh, there are these groups that were pretty violent, but they were making it work most of the time in Catalonia. No, that's not true. And again, this was a man who had a lot of support from the masses, including, yes, the Roman Catholic Church.
What? Can you name one example of fascism that's ever worked? Both the times real fascism was installed, it failed. Although Stephen would probably say that, well, look, if Nazi Germany just hadn't started World War II, if they just in their own little country just did their fascism all by themselves and never, expanded out and started World War II, then he probably would think it would be a great place, actually.
And its constituents.
Yeah.
So if you have violence and violence, let's just really simplify it. All right, you have violence and you have violence. But in one case, you have violence, starvation, and poverty. In the other case, you have violence that stops mass starvation and poverty. You understand why the people of these countries don't share the opinions of the professors.
That wasn't happening in Chile, or he's going to bring up Bolivia, or Brazil. No, Stephen, there wasn't the kind of violence like what was seen directly after the coups. In terms of political violence, there's comparatively very little of it. So thanks for the false equivalency there.
In discussing historical cases of fascism. Let's go to case 4, Bolivia. By the way, all the references for these links are in the description. I highly recommend that you read up on this a little bit more, especially Pinochet. That's a fascinating story to see the boom that we saw economically in Chile. So the story you've been told with Bolivia, 71, U.S. backed.
Like he's for, like, imagine being for sale for fascism like this.
Dictator Hugo Banzer took power after a violent coup. By the way, there's of course truth to this. U.S. backed. Do you guys understand?
Yeah.
Again, 100 million dead from communism, the 20th century.
85 million dead from fascism.
And there's always some communist turd swirling around in South America. So of course, we're going to have a vested interest and go, oh wait, is there someone who's anything other than communist? Because we don't want that on our continent. So yeah, it doesn't mean that there's some...
Why is it any of your business? What? Stephen, I hate to tell you this, but there are bad people literally everywhere. We now need to invade North Korea and China and Russia, like right now. We have to do that right now, according to you. This is actually the language that Marco Rubio is using right now. We can't allow it on our continent. Our continent, our hemisphere. South America's not in the North American continent, actually. Wait, he said continent, didn't he?
Wait, is there someone who's anything other than communist? Because we don't want that on our continent. So
right, okay, yeah. So apparently Steven Crowder's version of stupidity is contagious, because I caught it for a second. We can't allow it in our hemisphere. What? Okay, they don't like us, so they can't allow our system to exist in this hemisphere. If you get to do that, so do they. And that, but obviously, so there's no principle of the matter here. It's just, I want to use violence to get what I want. Now, is there an argument you can make for keeping what you perceive as nefarious forces away from your homeland? Yeah, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was solved how? Diplomatically. So we know for a fact that we can deal with issues like that diplomatically. But no, Stephen thinks, yeah, people that live like 10,000 miles away from me, what I want is a bunch of violent deaths and fascism to inflict those people. I care so much that they don't live hungry under socialism that I want them to die under fascism, even though it has nothing to do with me and doesn't affect me personally.
one of the most repressive in Bolivia's history. Here's the reality. Okay. 52 to 1970, Bolivia had this crazy leftist revolution.
God, is he going to say that inflation was high, but people weren't being murdered? So that's why they had to install a murderous regime where they didn't have democracy anymore? Is that what he's going to say?
They nationalized mines, oil, a lot of land to be clear. So very similar to what you see in places like Cuba, right? What they don't tell you is not only the people killed, but before you had a military coup. Let me ask you this. How do you think you nationalize mines, oil, or land?
Up
Where the
there.
government
Ask Donald Trump. He did it.
takes
The
it.
people, they willingly give it up.
Right.
They're tired of dealing with it themselves.
Right.
It's hard.
So that means guys with guns come and take it away. And very often you can go click these links. They don't list that as the same violence, or they don't put it in the same category as the coup that followed it. So they'll just mention like, well, they instituted policies, nationalized. So when men come in and take your stuff, take your private stuff, your personal stuff with guns, it's a policy. When men fight those people with equal guns, oh, it's a coup. So you see the scam?
Yeah, that's literally how it works. I don't know the history behind this, but if the state is doing it, then yes, that's just the state doing what it does. That's the political apparatus doing what it does. When the military comes in and overthrows the democracy, yes, that's just what a coup is. And I didn't think that Steven Crowder was such a postmodernist. I didn't think that he was a radical reconstructivist and he has his own private definitions for things. Cool. Good for you, Stephen.
It's being played. Then 70 to 71, you had the it was a leftist Tory seized power. Crazy, even more radical government, leftist government, and they basically replaced what you know as Congress with a workers' Soviet. So the result was Hugo Banzer, staged a coup with the support of a huge percentage of the population who were helpless and could do nothing. And what were the results? Well, you saw GDP double its historical average. You saw prices stabilize. You saw foreign.
It's just the same crap over and over again. Again, Stephen, why did you not advocate for any of this in America under Biden? Because you don't want any of this. And yeah, to be fair, the only time I will do that here for Stephen is, at the beginning of the video, he says, look, I'm not trying to excuse any of these things, but he's saying that they're better. Okay, Stephen, do you think that it would have been better if after like halfway through Biden's presidency, there was just a military coup, and so we didn't have a 2024 election, for example? If you don't think that's better, then why do you get to tell other people or look at the historical record and think, thank God it happened to these people, even though I would never want it to happen to me?
Even the bad fascists, they were a mistaken response to equally bad Marxists or leftists.
Yeah. Okay. What happened to lead up to the installment of these far left characters in all these other places? You know, he briefly touched on one example. None of that happened. Didn't give equal time to any of that. He just said, you know, somehow out of nowhere, all this socialism happened. But we do know why the fascism happened, and it was justified.
And Marxism, communism, has killed far more people, and it's not even close. It's not even close.
85 and 100 are pretty darn close, and the only reason the 85 wasn't drastically higher was because luckily the communists defeated them very early on. In less than a decade, they killed almost as many people as the other type of system did in 60 years.
So rather than starting history at the response, well, the left deliberately doesn't want you to look just a little bit further. Just do this. Anytime you hear about fascists, whether it's Pinochet, whether it's Panzer.
Yeah, they don't want you to look further. I'm going to go right up into the point where fascism was installed and not look any further. But it's those other people that are doing that.
Or take your pick.
What a clown.
Just rewind the tape by 2 years. 2 years more than whenever the person telling you the story is starting off. They start off in 64, just rewind at 62.
Okay, Stephen, what was happening in 60? Do you want to tell us? Would you ever do that? No.
They start off in 71, just rewind at 69. You'll go, oh, I get it. Doesn't mean it's right, but I get it. Let me ask you this. What would you do in this country? What would you do in this country if you had an election?
Not murder people. I do not support murdering people and violent overthrows of democracy. I don't. No matter how hungry the people are. I do not support that in a period of only 3 years. Wait until the next election.
And I'm not saying that this has happened, to be clear. But if you had an election verifiably stolen, and then you had, let's say, the DSA come in, pack the courts, eliminate the Electoral College, legalize every single illegal alien in this country, and by the way, usher in another 20 million more.
Well, Reagan gave amnesty to like 3 million people. So should there have been a coup to replace Ronald Reagan? No.
So that you would have socialism forever, and they would use that political capital and power to nationalize your private shit. Think you'd support a coup? Or would that be too fascist for you?
By the way, you can't vote your way out of communism. At some point, you have to pick up a rifle.
Right. So I was just going to say, we can just have another election. That's how it works. And then this guy's saying you can't vote your way out of communism. In every single case that he's talked about, they never waited for an election to take place, and then it was replaced with a system that doesn't have democracy. It's everything they're talking about is the opposite. Now, yes, in Cuba, it is like what he's talking about, but not in any of the examples that they actually brought up.
Like, there's just really no other way to do it. We used to know that. We used to have this understanding of how threatening communists and communism were to the United States. And now we're just kind of like, well...
Yeah, and at one point we went to war against fascism, and now he's saying we need to go to war against ourselves with fascism.
What's funny is when people are like, why would you call him just because he's black? It's like, because he basically attempted to nationalize a fifth of the economy.
Yes.
So that would be, in other words, that would be a much more legitimate example of socialism than what you would say is fascism of Donald Trump, who, by the way, has opened up more speech on the internet.
Yes. From an economic standpoint, is he fascist? No. They said they
opened up free speech on the internet is an absolutely insane thing to say. They're disappearing people from the country for criticizing Israel. And they threaten to sue everybody on the news that dares tell the truth about how bad they are. And then what else?
More speech on the internet.
Yes. From an economic standpoint, is he fascist? No.
Yes, we went through the 14 points already.
They said they've consolidated all power in the executive. Are you kidding me right now? Do you see how many times?
The Supreme Court has voted in favor of unitary executive theory, or whatever it's called. And every single time they've had the chance to, they've voted for that, except for, except for like a birthright citizenship. That's been one of his only L's. Trump also, it was in his first administration, he tweeted, I can't find it. He must have deleted it a very long time ago. But he tweeted out that, according to the Constitution, my power is absolute.
Judges go after him, and how many bills he can't.
He's a fascist who not only can't cancel elections, or isn't even attempting to, he's a fascist who can't
Isn't attempting to is hilarious.
even get us.
He literally said stop the count. He demanded that they stop the count in the 2020 election and then tried to get the results overturned. And there's going to be fuckery with these upcoming midterms. And he talks about how he's going to do that. Okay, Tubby. Well, I don't really think we need to hear any more of that. It's also the end of the video. So thanks for watching. Get a free book, 2 free audiobooks, and ad-free videos by becoming a Patreon member.